What if the voice inside your head isn't describing life, it's designing it? In this quiet unfolding of insight and imagination, you're invited into a story where perception becomes participation and thoughts ripple far beyond your mind. There's nothing to chase here. Just breathe. Let your shoulders soften. Let your mind settle. You're not here by accident. Wherever you are in the world, morning light, midnight hush, or a pause between tasks, this message is for you. Subscribe if you haven't yet. Let's go deeper together. Because the scene begins now, and you are both its witness and its writer. In this immersive journey, we explore how your inner voice isn't just noise, it's a frequency, a quiet architect, a field of resonance that shapes what becomes real. Ancient wisdom, quantum discovery, and soft human insight meet in a way that gently shifts your perspective, dissolving limitation, not with force, but with clarity. By the end, you'll see, the narrator you've always trusted isn't fixed. It's trainable, tunable, alive. You'll start to hear it differently, and when that happens, reality begins to realign itself not around your fears, but around your remembering. Your voice holds power, and the world listens when it's spoken, from presence. You may believe you're simply moving through life, responding to what happens, adjusting course as you go. But something more profound is quietly unfolding behind the curtain of your awareness. You're not merely walking through experience. You're weaving it, moment by moment. Not in loud, traumatic acts, but in soft, habitual choices. In sighs. In internal phrases you don't even realize you repeat. In the things you assume, the words you whisper only to yourself, the stories you don't think anyone hears, but something does. These inner whispers are not commentary. They're choreography. They don't describe what's real. They help decide what becomes real. Even now, as you read this, there is a soft evaluator inside you, the one that comments without invitation, that labels, that judges, that says yes, no, I know this, or I've heard better. That voice is not neutral. It's generative. The energy of your interpretation is not passive, it's participatory. You are not looking at the world through a window. You're looking through a lens. That shapes what the light does when it enters. And that shaping is continuous dot. It's like walking through a forest where your footsteps plant trees. The path behind you only looks fixed because you've narrated it into solidity. But ahead of you, it's mist. And your voice, your expectations, your quiet emotional frequency is the warmth that makes that mist form into trail, branch, or barrier. This means you're not just watching life unfold. You're humming it into shape with the frequencies you're broadcasting beneath your awareness. Let's slow that down. Let it settle. This isn't metaphor. This is resonance. The field around you, the one science calls quantum and mystics call spirit, doesn't obey the laws of linear cause and effect the way most of us were taught. It listens for coherence. It responds to energetic instruction, the kind of instruction your internal narrative delivers constantly, like a tuning fork humming through your nervous system. Your brain is not just receiving reality, it's participating in the construction of it. That construction is sensitive to tone, emotional tone, expectation tone, belief tone. You don't manifest by demanding. You manifest by resonating. And your resonance is defined by the voice you trust the most, the one inside your head. But here's the gentle problem. Most people have inherited that voice, not crafted it. They speak to themselves in the cadence of their caregivers, their first teachers, their society, their trauma. They replay phrases that were never really theirs. I'm always too much. I'm not creative. Things don't work out for me. These beliefs become thought habits. Thought habits become filters. And filters become experience. Not because life is cruel, but because life is attentive, and your attention is the flashlight. What you light up, you begin to live in. Now imagine if that voice could become conscious, not forced into false positivity, but slowly illuminated, not judged or shamed, but heard, understood, rewritten through relationship, not resistance. That's where transformation begins, not in the world outside, but in the inner atmosphere you allow to guide your gaze. This is not about control. It's about collaboration. Quantum mechanics reveals something astonishing. Particles exist in multiple potential states until observed. That means observation doesn't just report reality, it shapes it. And the observer's emotional frequency, the state from which you look, matters. Fear collapses possibility into defense. Curiosity expands it into discovery. Love harmonizes it into coherence. So if the observer within you is tired, afraid, rehearsing old loops, then what appears in the world will likely mirror that tone. But if you meet life from a softened, present, open state, the field begins to respond in kind. Here's a strange thing we rarely consider. Your inner voice doesn't just talk about people. It talks to them. Not with sound, but with signal. The way you expect someone to treat you, the way you silently narrate their personality, interacts with their field. If you believe they are distant, dismissive, unreliable, you will subconsciously filter for and feed that behavior. But if you hold space for the possibility of change, you alter the space between you. People shift not because you demanded it, but because your attention gave them permission to meet you in a new frequency. That's the quiet power of your internal narrative. It doesn't just affect you. It affects the dance you're in with, the world. But let's bring it closer. Begin by listening, not just to what your mind says, but how it says it. Notice the tone beneath the words. Is it urgent? Defensive? Skeptical? Is it tender? Is it curious? Notice how your body feels in response. That tension in your chest, that flutter in your stomach, that's data. That's the body responding to the music of your mind. And just like any instrument, the tune can be adjusted. You don't need to fix every thought. You only need to build a relationship with the thinker. Imagine saying, there's that voice again. It's afraid. It learned to be. But I don't have to obey it. This is how reprogramming begins. Not with violence, but with intimacy. Now let's take this deeper dot. Each time you anticipate something negative, your body prepares for it. Stress hormones rise. The nervous system constricts. Your sensory perception narrows. You literally see and hear less. Your brain becomes a threat detector, not a possibility receiver. This isn't imagination. It's neurobiology. And the feedback loop completes when your environment responds to that narrow state with more conflict, fewer options, and less joy. But when you gently disrupt that loop by choosing a new question, a softer thought, a pause before reaction, your biology shifts. The stress hormones ease. The nervous system opens. You become more receptive, not only to others, but to unexpected solutions. This is the essence of energetic participation. You don't bend reality with effort. You shape it by tuning your receptivity. Your thoughts are not powerful because they're loud. They're powerful because they're consistent. The ones you rehearse are the ones you live. So begin rehearsing differently. Instead of, this always happens, try, something else is possible. Instead of, they don't care, try, what would change if I listened for their fear too? These are not delusions. They're permissions. And the field loves permission. What you believe is possible becomes what you are biologically prepared to receive. And preparation is everything. Let's not rush. Stay with this dot. Your life isn't asking you to be perfect. It's inviting you to be present. The difference is subtle, but everything. Perfection is performance. Presence is listening. When you become present with your inner voice, when you hear its tone and ask it why it speaks that way, something melts. The story loses sharpness. You stop being run by the script. You begin co-authoring it. This is your real power, not to control life, but to converse with it. Not to bend it with will, but to harmonize with it through attention dot. So the next time your voice narrates the worst, ask, whose voice is that really? The answer may surprise you. And when it does, you'll know the shift has begun. If your thoughts were radio stations, your life would be the song that plays in response. Not just once, but over and over, adjusting slightly based on the strength of the signal you keep transmitting. You're not just choosing what to focus on. You're programming your environment to echo your expectations. And the most persistent frequency, the one that guides that programming, is not the loudest. It's the one you trust the most. That quiet, constant voice inside, the one you barely notice anymore because it sounds so much like you. But here's the shift. Just because a voice is familiar doesn't mean it's true. Just because it's automatic doesn't mean it's aligned. Some of our most powerful inner tones were never consciously chosen. They were absorbed, recycled. And if not questioned, they become the architects of our next experience. You don't have to believe this immediately. Just observe it. Start small. Notice how, on days you assume everything will go wrong, your awareness bends to find evidence for it. Notice how, when you assume someone doesn't like you, even a neutral glance feels like rejection. Notice how, when you expect to be misunderstood, your words twist just slightly, preemptively defensive. None of this is conscious. It's the invisible dance of energy, the mind preparing the body to meet the world with a pre-written script. But that script is editable, not by force, but by relationship. You can change the frequency, but first, you have to hear it. There is a tone that runs through your mind like a subterranean current deeper than language. It's the feeling tone of your beliefs. You may never say, "I'm not safe," but your inner monologue might be, structured entirely around scanning for threat. You may not say, "I'm unlovable," but the way you shrink in conversations tells the field that's the program running in the background. The field doesn't respond to your surface thoughts. It responds to your dominant frequency, and that frequency is mostly emotional. Quantum biology has revealed something stunning. The heart emits an electromagnetic field thousands of times stronger than the brain's, and that field is shaped by feeling. That means your emotional baseline, your felt sense of what's real, what's safe, what's true, is what most influences how reality responds to you. Not your words, your state. Which is why you can repeat affirmations for hours and still feel stuck. If your nervous system doesn't believe the words, the frequency stays the same. But the beautiful secret is this: your state is not fixed. It is fluid. It can be softened. And softness is the beginning of reprogramming. Start here. The next time a thought enters that feels tight, heavy, or cruel, don't argue with it. Don't rush to replace it. Just feel what it does to your body. Does it tighten your jaw? Sink your chest? Constrict your breath? That's the key. That's where the shift lives, not in the content, but in the sensation. Now, try asking the thought, what are you protecting me from? Often, the voice is not attacking you. It's shielding you from disappointment, from failure, from hurt. But its methods are outdated. And when you meet the voice with compassion, something strange happens. It softens. It listens. It begins to trust you again. Because here's the truth most people miss. The inner voice is not your enemy. It's your younger self, still trying to keep you safe in ways that once worked, but now limit you. And safety doesn't require silence. It requires leadership, that you become the leader of your mind, not by controlling every thought, but by choosing the emotional lens through which you observe them. You don't tell the voice to go away. You say, "I hear you, but I'm writing something new." That moment is pivotal. It's not just psychological, it's quantum, because every shift in awareness opens a different pathway in the field. Let's ground this in the invisible science of choice. In quantum terms, reality exists as a cloud of probabilities until observation locks one into form. What determines the form? The observer's lens. In your life, that lens is composed of the assumptions you hold, the emotional filters you use to scan your experience. If you expect difficulty, you reinforce the neural pathways and electromagnetic conditions for difficulty. But if you shift even slightly toward curiosity, the field reorganizes. Not because you're doing something, but because you're allowing something. You're becoming a match for what wasn't accessible in a more constricted state. It's like tuning a radio. The music doesn't change when you strain to hear it. It changes when you shift the dial. Now extend this beyond yourself. Because this isn't just about personal peace. It's about field coherence. Every time you shift your inner voice from contraction to curiosity, you ripple into the collective. You become a node of coherence in a web of minds that are mostly broadcasting static. Your presence becomes a reference point for others who are lost in noise. They don't even have to know why they feel safer around you. They just do. Your frequency becomes a permission slip. Your attention becomes a medicine. This is the sacred weight of your awareness. And it begins with a simple but radical practice. Pausing before narrating. Each time something unexpected happens, pause before naming it. Don't call it a setback. Don't call it failure. Ask instead, what's being rearranged here that I can't yet see? This question opens doors. It suspends judgment long enough for a different kind of solution to enter. Often, what we call disruption is actually alignment misunderstood because it arrives wearing the costume of chaos. But your observer voice can be trained to see past the costume, to listen for pattern, timing, invitation. You are not here to predict life. You are here to perceive it clearly. And clarity comes not from certainty, but from stillness. Most of you speak to ourselves like frightened narrators, desperate to make sense of a world that seems to shift too fast. But when you slow down, when you say, I don't know what this means yet, and that's okay, you stop spinning the story from fear. You give the moment space to breathe. And that space is where magic sneaks in. That's where the unexpected arrives. That's where coherence finds you. So what if your job isn't to describe the moment, but to meet it, to feel it in your body, to hear what it wants to say before you label it? What if you could trust that reality is not happening to you? It's conversing with you, not in the language of logic, but in the poetry of frequency? This is the shift from survival to sovereignty. You stop reacting. You start resonating. You stop scripting disaster. You start listening for emergence. You stop echoing the past. You begin vibrating into the future, not the one shaped by history, but the one shaped by your willingness to observe without assumption. And here's the paradox. As you stop trying to create reality, reality starts dancing with you. You wake up not with dread, but with attention. Not with a script, but with a question. You ask, what miracle is hiding in the ordinary today? You move through the world less as a planner and more as a poet. You don't need to control the story. You only need to witness it clearly. Speak to it gently and listen when it whispers back. This is your true voice, not the loud one. The aligned one, the one that doesn't shout to be heard, but hums until the field can't help but answer. There is a moment quiet and subtle when you no longer believe everything your mind tells you. Not because you've become distant from yourself, but because you've become closer. Close enough to recognize that not all thoughts are truth. Some are echoes, residue, ghost signals from an earlier version of you trying to protect itself. And in that soft distance, between hearing the voice and identifying with it, you find a new kind of freedom. The freedom to narrate from choice, rather than from history. you begin to notice things others miss. Like how the world subtly bends toward your inner tone. How people respond to your presence more than your words. How the same street feels different when you're tuned to gratitude instead of tension. The trees shimmer more. Time slows down. Or perhaps it doesn't slow. It just stops fighting your pace. It walks with you. This isn't coincidence. It's coherence. You are no longer emitting scattered signals. You're humming one note and life begins to sing, back in harmony. But there's another layer. Most people think clarity comes from answers. But clarity, in its deepest form, comes from presence. When you drop into presence, not the kind that requires meditation mats or perfect stillness, but the kind that arrives when you decide to stop arguing with what is your voice changes. It stops scrambling. It starts witnessing. The frantic narrator becomes a still observer. And that stillness, pure awareness, is the most magnetic force in existence. Why? Because the field doesn't want your perfection. It wants your alignment. It wants to meet you at the frequency of now. Not who you were, not who you're performing to be, but the vibration of your honest attention. This is where the mystical and the mundane collide. You're not here to escape the world. You're here to infuse it with more clarity, more spaciousness, more presence. You bring magic to the marketplace. You bring breath to the deadline. You bring tenderness to the transaction. This isn't spiritual bypass. It's spiritual embodiment. It's you remembering that your voice shapes the room you're in, even if you don't speak. So what happens? When your observer voice becomes infused with reverence, everything becomes sacred. Even the mess. The missed train becomes a portal. The conflict becomes an invitation. The silence between texts becomes an echo chamber where your deeper self speaks. You stop needing life to look a certain way because you trust your lens enough to meet it as it is. This is the freedom beyond freedom. The kind that doesn't need constant shifts in outer reality because the inner signal is steady, clear, calm. From this place, you stop narrating through pain. And you start narrating through potential. Instead of, I always mess this up, you hear yourself say, I'm learning to hold more. Instead of, they don't get me, you whisper, I'm becoming someone worth knowing, even to myself. Instead of, this is too much, you murmur, this is the stretch where I grow. And the field listens, not because it's judging your words, but because it's translating your tone. And your tone has changed not just what you say, but how you be. You are no longer scanning for what's wrong. You're scanning for what's emerging. You begin to feel time differently. Linear time loses its grip. You don't rush to outcomes. You rest into alignment. You realize that the future isn't a fixed destination. It's a frequency you attune to now. You can feel the timeline that wants to meet you, not because you chase it, but because you clear space for it. It arrives in dream fragments, in strange timing, in the warmth of a moment that shouldn't feel good, but does. This is timeline healing. You are not healing your past. You are allowing a future to reach back and hold the version of you who forgot that softness was safe. And when you speak, from that future, your voice becomes prophetic, not because it predicts, but because it remembers. It remembers who you were before you learned fear. It remembers who you are beneath strategy. It remembers that frequency is older than thought and far more loyal. That's why even when your life feels confusing, your body knows truth by how it vibrates. That light in the chest, that pause in the breath, that hush in the mind when something real is spoken. These are not just reactions. These are alignments. Your system responding to the home frequency of your being. And when your voice begins to hum in that frequency, your relationships change. You stop trying to convince people. You stop over-explaining. You stop performing for acceptance. Instead, your presence becomes enough. Your attention becomes a blessing. Your silence becomes a form of intimacy. You don't speak to be heard. You speak to tune. And you don't need everyone to resonate. Just the right ones. And they will come. Not because you chased, but because you became audible to those who were already listening. This is energetic intimacy. And it begins with internal intimacy. You are becoming someone you trust again. And that trust changes everything. It changes how you walk into a room, how you hold space for tension, how you wait without grasping, how you act without defense. Because your voice, your truest one, no longer scrambles to prove. It simply offers presence. And presence is magnetic to miracles. Let's go one step further. There is a layer of reality, so subtle that most people never touch it. It lives in the moments between breath and thought, between stimulus and story. It's the place where you're not yet interpreting. You're just noticing. That pause is not empty. It is the portal, the creative zero point, the stillness that births new timelines. The more you practice entering that pause before you narrate, before you name, judge, explain, the more you begin to write a different kind of story. One where life is not just happening, it's conversing. One where the universe is not just indifferent, it's listening, it's responding. And your voice is the tone to which it harmonizes. This is why the most powerful thing you can do isn't to manifest harder, but to observe softer. Softer observation leads to more fluid possibility. And in that fluidity, something ancient awakens. The recognition that your life isn't just yours. It's part of a larger field. And your frequency contributes to that field with every moment you choose clarity over confusion, curiosity over fear, presence over reaction. You become a stabilizer, not because you are perfect, but because you've stopped transmitting panic. You've stopped repeating the echo of wounds. You've chosen to speak as if life is listening, because it is. And you've begun to love the voice within, not for what it says, but for what it allows. It allows spaciousness. It allows grace. It allows a future that doesn't match your past. It allows a self you haven't met yet to begin arriving. One sentence at a time, one breath, one shift in tone. So now, with every small choice, with every quiet observation, you are tuning not just your world, but the web of worlds. You are not just shaping your life. You are participating in a new frequency for the collective. And as that field responds, you remember, you are not just a narrator of the present. You are a whisper from the future. And your voice, calm, aware, resonant, shapes what becomes real. You've been told that thought is private, that what happens inside your head stays there, that no one can hear it, touch it, or feel it unless you speak it out loud. But this was never entirely true. Thought may be invisible, but it is not silent. Every thought vibrates. Every emotion charges it, and every repetition embeds it. These vibrations extend beyond your neurons. They radiate through your electromagnetic field. And that field, yes, that quiet field just inches beyond your skin, is not still. It's a language. It carries your inner story like scent carries memory. Others may not consciously know what they're feeling when they feel you, but they do feel it. You are never not broadcasting. This means your inner world is never isolated. It is always participating, always broadcasting, always creating subtle instructions for what appears next. So the real question is no longer, is my voice shaping reality? It is, what is it shaping? And is that aligned with the self I'm becoming? Pause here. This shift is not about fixing thoughts. It's about tuning attention. Your thoughts are weather. Your attention is climate. And the climate is what shapes how things grow. Once you begin to observe your inner monologue not as a fact, but as a frequency, a space opens. That space is not empty. It is the space of choice, a pause before pattern, a whisper before a wave. It's where change becomes not just possible, but sustainable. You begin to notice how your assumptions create atmosphere, how your silent expectations make others tense or soften. You start recognizing the invisible loops, how your thoughts about the day shape the day before it even begins. You remember that the same places, the same people, the same conversations only feel stuck because you've narrated them the same way for years. But something is softening now. You are learning the art of interruption. Not interruption by force, but by observation. You don't silence the old voice. You listen to it with compassion. You hold its trembling tone and ask, "Who taught you this?" And most times, the voice was trained, not born. It was conditioned by survival, not creation. And survival is skilled at imitation. It mimics the tone of past pain, past rejection, past fear, and loops it forward into the now. But now, you're shifting from mimicry to mastery. You're beginning to narrate with precision, with honesty, with softness. You no longer confuse your past with your lens. You stop dragging yesterday's wounds into today's script. And when you do, something remarkable happens. The present starts presenting differently. People shift, not because they changed, but because you did. Imagine entering a room and realizing that nothing in it has been labeled yet. No enemy, no obstacle, no barrier. Everything becomes possibility again. The walls don't close in. They wait. The chair doesn't feel empty. It waits. The moment no longer tightens, it opens. It says, "Speak with me, not at me." And your inner voice hums, "I am ready to witness, not predict." From this space, solutions emerge, but not as lightning, as murmurs, as synchronicity, as timing that feels accidental until you realize you're in flow with your own signal. The signal you're sending now is different. It no longer says, "Prove something to me." It says, "Show me what aligns with this clarity." That clarity is not certainty. It's curiosity made still. It's presence that doesn't tremble. It's the ability to sit inside the unknown without reaching for the next sentence. And when the field feels that from you, it starts to offer things it couldn't offer before. Because now, you're not arguing with the moment. You're collaborating with it. This is the subtle magic of quantum alignment. Not control. Co-creation. Prediction. Commission. Not fear. Frequency. And frequency is real. It's not poetic. It's electromagnetic. Your heart sends signals. Your brain reads them. Your gut responds. And the universe, listening through vibration, answers back, not always in words, but in timing, in mood, in the next thought that arrives with ease instead of struggle. But here's what's extraordinary. Once your inner tone shifts, you become a node in the collective field. Your clarity is no longer personal. It's medicinal. You're stabilizing something bigger than you. People don't know why they feel better around you, but they do. You've become a tuning fork, not for your voice, but for everyone's. Let's not overlook the scale of this. The more people who shift their inner voice from reactivity to resonance, the more coherent the entire web becomes. That's how a culture changes, not through policy alone, but through perception, through the quiet revolution of people remembering that their story is sculpted by their attention. And attention is transferable. When one person pays attention, with love, it gives permission to others to do the same. So your voice becomes an offering, not loud, not dramatic, but steady, soft, clear. And in that steadiness, conflict dissolves faster. Not because it's suppressed, but because its story changes. Old identities don't grip as hard. Old narratives don't rehearse as often. The silence between thoughts grows longer. And in that silence, something enters that doesn't feel like you, but is more you than anything ever was. Call it source. Call it field. Call it clarity. Dot. It doesn't care what you call it. Dot. It just wants to move through your voice again. And when you allow it to, you speak differently, not to convince, to awaken. Dot. Not to fix, to invite, not to predict, to perceive. Become a mirror with no distortion. You reflect possibility without grasping it. You allow others to feel themselves clearly in your presence. And that is the most generous gift of all. Dot. So now, the only real question becomes, what frequency do you wish to ripple? Because every inner phrase you accept as true becomes architecture. Dot. It becomes street, doorway, threshold. Dot. It becomes who you meet and who you miss. Dot. It becomes what waits for you on the other side of uncertainty. Dot. And if you pause before you speak, especially to yourself, you might just feel the entire field listening. Dot. Waiting. Dot. Not for perfection, for presence, for resonance. Dot. So speak softly. Dot. And let the new story begin. There is a voice inside you that has not spoken in years. Not because it is silent, but because it is waiting. Waiting for space. Waiting for presence. Waiting for the noise to soften enough so it can finally rise, not as a shout, not as an order, but as a remembering. This voice doesn't speak in urgency. It speaks in resonance. It doesn't use language the way your mind does. It uses sensation, emotion, rhythm. And when it finally comes forward, it doesn't say, do more. It says, be here. And suddenly, your world begins to rearrange itself. Because this is the moment when narration becomes knowing. When commentary gives way to communion. You stop living as the character in a story you didn't write and start returning to the author's chair. Not to control the plot, but to remember you never lost the pen. That every moment of reactivity was not failure, it was forgetting. And every pause of awareness now becomes a portal to something entirely different. Something that moves at the pace of breath, of truth, of trust. You notice it first in your reactions. They don't arrive as quickly. The voice that once jumped defense now pauses. The one that used to spiral into fear now breathes first. You are no longer driven by old loops. You're observing them and choosing again. And that choice is everything. Because in quantum terms, choice is collapse. It's the moment infinite waves of possibility fold into form. The instant your attention locks onto a tone, a direction, a belief, reality begins organizing around that vibration. So what you allow yourself to expect, what you believe is reasonable, what you assume is safe, all of that becomes instruction. Not to fate, but to the field. To the living, breathing intelligence that constantly listens, not to what you say, but to what you hum. And what you hum becomes home. This is the secret to rewriting your life. You don't change everything at once. You change the tone you carry through it. Because tone is time, and time is perception. And perception, when tuned gently, can shift the entire trajectory of what arrives next. You begin to move differently in your body, not rushing, not shrinking. You take up space without apology. You enter rooms like your energy is not something to hide or prove, but simply to radiate. You feel the weight of your gaze, the warmth in your hands, the invitation of your stillness. People respond to you before you speak, and you begin to understand that it's because you've already spoken energetically. The signal was sent, the tuning has occurred, and you wonder, why did no one teach us this? Why were we taught that reality is built only through effort, through output, through planning? Why were we trained to measure our lives by the visible when the invisible was always the architect? And then you realize, we weren't told because most people forgot. They forgot the voice beneath the voice, the knowing beneath the narration, the resonance beneath the repetition. But now you are remembering, and memory changes. Magnetism. You remember how it feels to speak with kindness, not just to others, but to the parts of yourself that have been bruised by time. You offer that voice a seat at the table. You let it speak, but you don't let it steer. You say, I know you've carried me here, but we're going somewhere new now. You don't have to be in charge to still be loved. And the parts of you that used to panic begin to rest. This is nervous system realignment, not forced. Felt. Not armored. Open. Not demanding. Trusting. And it allows you to tune into frequencies you once blocked. The frequencies of subtle guidance, gentle nudges, timeless clarity. You don't need a sign anymore. You feel the signal. You don't need the world to shout you. Hear the whisper. You don't need certainty. You've become fluent in the language of direction. This is the return of spiritual intelligence, not in a mystical sense, but in a practical one. Your life becomes your teacher. Your body becomes your compass. Your attention becomes your portal. And everywhere you go, you carry that tone with you, not as a strategy. As a remembering. You begin to recognize others who are tuning too. You feel their frequency before you hear their words. You find comfort in eye contact, in shared stillness, in conversations that have more silence than sound. The old way of connecting through performance, projection, protection no longer appeals to you. You crave coherence, realness, presence. You offer it, and it returns. This is how the new earth is built, not in policy first, but in perception. Not in institutions first, but in intimacy. Every person who shifts their inner voice from panic to presence contributes to the rising harmony. And when harmony rises, the field becomes easier for others to access. Healing gets faster. Ideas become clearer. The world starts humming a new story. You are part of that hum. Not as an idea, but as a node, a living, breathing vibration. A reminder that the future isn't a place we go, it's a frequency we allow. And the more you allow, the more arrives. You begin to sense future versions of yourself, not in fantasy, but in familiarity. The version of you that speaks calmly under pressure, that opens when others close, that creates when others copy, that listens when others lecture. That self is not distant. It is accessible. It is one tone away. One choice, one pause, one breath. Don't have to do more to reach it. You only have to attune, because reality doesn't need convincing. It needs coherence. And when your inner voice becomes coherent, not perfect, but aligned, everything else begins to meet you differently. And so here you are, standing not at the end of a journey, but at the doorway of conscious narration. Are no longer waiting to be chosen, validated, rescued. You are choosing your tone. You are validating your perception. You are rescuing your power, not from the world, but from the loops you once rehearsed in your own mind. This is sacred. This is simple. Not easy, but natural. Not flashy, but permanent. You have always been shaping reality. Now, you're doing it on purpose. You have always been speaking into the field. No, you're doing it with presence. And the field, generous, intelligent, alive, is responding in ways you will never fully see, but always feel, because your voice has changed, and so has the world that listens. Something remarkable begins to happen when your inner voice stabilizes. Not when it becomes flawless or unshakably wise, but when it becomes consistent in its compassion. Your field changes shape, not in a way you can measure, but in a way everyone around you can feel. Rooms you walk into begin to soften. Conversations you enter begin to slow down. People begin to say, there's something about you I can't explain. And the truth is, they're not reacting to you. They're resonating with your field, with the tone you've been practicing silently for weeks, months, or years, with the atmosphere your inner voice carries. You are no longer just shaping your own life. You are now influencing lives without needing to speak. Not because of charisma. Because of coherence. This is the power of energetic leadership. Not as hierarchy, not as authority, but as presence. The kind of presence that doesn't need to fix, rescue, or impress. It simply broadcasts safety. It hums a new template into the room. And the moment you trust that hum, the world begins to organize around it. This is where personal evolution becomes collective influence, not by scaling louder, but by radiating deeper. You don't need to convince anyone of anything. You don't even need them to understand what you're doing. You only need to embody it. When you do, others begin to sense new possibilities, not through your advice, but through their own bodies. Activated in your presence, you become a permission slip they didn't know they needed. But this isn't about you being a guru. This is about you becoming so clear within that you no longer distort what's around you. You stop projecting insecurity into situations. You stop defending old wounds. You stop reacting to what isn't even happening. Instead, you stand in a kind of frequency that says, I know who I am, even when nothing goes to plan. And that knowing makes you flexible, responsive, alive. The world begins to feel like a conversation again, not a battle. This is not performance. This is presence. And presence is powerful in ways strategy will never be. Presence walks into a boardroom and says nothing, but the room shifts. Presence holds a crying friend, not with solutions, but with stillness. Presence holds the line inside chaos and becomes the axis around which clarity forms. You begin to notice this happening more often. Not because you try, because you've stopped narrating from fear. The moment you stopped repeating the story of your own inadequacy, your posture changed, your voice softened, your awareness widened, and the world subtly, gently, constantly began responding to that shift. You become a mirror without distortion. And others feel safe enough to see themselves in you. This is the deeper role of your inner voice, not just to shape your path, but to shape the paths that intersect with yours. When you speak to yourself from reverence, that reverence spills into your interactions. When you hold your pain with patience, you hold others' pain differently. You no longer ask life to be easy, you ask life to be real. And reality rises to meet you with depth. Let's go further. As your voice becomes less reactive, your perception of time transforms again. You begin to feel the shape of moments. Some moments stretch like they're inviting you to learn, to listen, to slow. Others compress like they're asking you to leap, to speak, to move. You are no longer measuring time by the clock, but by the coherence of your own resonance. And this changes everything about how you act, how you decide, how you dream. You are no longer chasing alignment. You are alignment. You are no longer asking for signs. You are becoming the signal. You are no longer reacting to noise. You are sculpting signal from within the noise, and this makes you rare, but not separate, because as you stabilize, you naturally draw others into resonance. Not to depend on you, but to awaken to themselves. You don't offer advice as much as you offer space. You don't fix people, you reflect their coherence back to them until they remember. Your presence becomes a memory trigger for who they were before distortion. And in this way, your healed voice becomes a healing frequency. You speak less, but everything you say has weight. You do less, but everything you do has depth. You plan less, but what unfolds carries beauty and precision that effort never could. And now, something unexpected occurs. Life begins to trust you. It gives you more responsibility, not in burden, but in opportunity. More clarity, not in certainty, but in alignment. More relationships, not for validation, but for expansion. You are not here to prove your voice. You are here to practice it. To tune it. To let it ripple. Because every room you enter, every heart you meet, every future you imagine is listening. And the voice you bring into those spaces matters more than you know. You begin to notice something strange. Not loud, not sudden subtle. The kind of strange that doesn't interrupt your life, but quietly folds itself into the edges of it, like light touching fog. You notice how your presence moves ahead of you. Before you speak, rooms settle. Before you act, momentum begins. Before you decide, options arise that weren't there moments ago. Not because you're predicting the future, but because you're aligning with it. Your inner voice has begun to hum a tone that time responds to, not as command, but as invitation. Is when you realize the universe doesn't need you to yell. It needs you to remember. Your inner voice, when aligned, becomes more than just a narrator. It becomes a tuning fork, a living signal, not for the self you've always been, but for the self you're still unfolding into. And this unfolding doesn't follow the rules you once believed in. It doesn't rush. It doesn't panic. It doesn't strive to be seen. It simply arrives, silently, consistently, through you. Now the shift gets deeper. You no longer judge the old voice, the one that used to spiral, the one that used to assume the worst. That voice was never your enemy. It was your early scaffolding, a system built to interpret danger through the lens of memory. But now you see its shape, you know its name, and because you've given it compassion instead of criticism, it relaxes. It steps aside, and what moves in to take its place is something older than thought, quieter than certainty, wiser than fear. It is you, the you that existed before fear, began organizing your speech. You start building your days differently, not from checklist, but from clarity, not from effort, but from energetic readiness. You don't move until your voice aligns. You don't respond until your tone feels true. You don't plan from lack, speak from fullness, and life listens. Your work becomes more fluid. Your relationships become less dramatic. Your sense of timing becomes uncanny. What would have once overwhelmed you now invites you. You meet it not as a task, but as a frequency-matching opportunity. You're not reacting. You're meeting resonance. You are becoming the kind of person whose voice rearranges the shape of what's possible, without needing volume, without needing force. You realize now that voice was never about speaking. It was always about broadcasting. And broadcasting doesn't require words. It requires coherence. Your new coherence is what builds bridges between you and others. Not just emotionally, but energetically. You begin to sense what's unsaid in the spaces between words. You begin to hear what others feel before they admit it. You feel the tremor behind their confidence. You sense the invitation inside their silence. Your voice no longer replies out of habit. It waits. It listens for the real question beneath, the one being asked. This is sacred communication. It moves slower, but it reaches deeper. And the people who meet you here begin to open in ways they didn't know they could, not because you solved them, because you made space for them. The space your voice now creates is rare, and rarity is magnetic. But with this gift comes responsibility, not to be perfect, but to remain present. You notice how easy it would be to revert, to fall back into fast words, sharp tones, rehearsed roles. And sometimes you do, but even then, you hear it. You feel it in your chest, that friction, that wobble. And instead of spiraling into guilt, you breathe, you recalibrate. You say gently to yourself, that was the old voice. I see it. I know it. I release it. And you return, not to an ideal. To a tone. The tone that reminds you that clarity is not a performance. It is a felt experience, that presence is not a product. It is a frequency that peace is not passive. It is a powerful act of tuning to now, tuning to truth, tuning to the version of you that doesn't shout to be heard, but hums to be felt. And here's what's wild. The future begins to arrange itself around that hum. You think of someone and they call. You speak a desire and synchronicity arrives. You feel calm. And timing aligns, not because you cast a spell, but because you stopped resisting the rhythm of the real. This rhythm was always there, but your old voice couldn't hear. It was too busy narrating the noise. But now, you've turned down the volume on urgency. You've opened the door to awareness. And what moves through that door is not just personal, it's planetary, because the tone you carry contributes to the tone we all live in. You begin to sense how interconnected it all is. How your personal pause creates ripples that help strangers breathe easier. How your inner peace becomes a node of safety in the nervous systems of people you've never met. How your refusal to narrate from scarcity allows someone else to choose generosity. This is the web, this is the field, this is the new voice awakening through you. And still, it asks for nothing loud. Just repetition, just presence. Just practice. You are not asked to preach, you are asked to hum. You're not here to force reality into shape. You're here to invite it into a new one. And the more consistently you narrate from coherence, the more consistently reality mirrors it back. Not in straight lines, not in predictable moments, but in felt textures, in subtle joys, in effortless clarity. You stop needing to grip the future because you're already aligned with its frequency. And in that alignment, effort feels like exhale. Connection feels like listening. Voice feels like truth before language. You don't need proof anymore. You have resonance. You don't need guarantees. You have signal. And that signal, the one you carry even now, in the quiet between these words, is how new timelines are built. Not in blueprints, but in hums. And now, as your voice settles into its truest tone, not louder, not sharper, just more deeply yours, you begin to sense what this was always about. Not about becoming someone new, but returning to the frequency that had always waited beneath. The noise. The world hasn't changed your way of seeing. It has. You speak now not to shape others, but to shape the field, gently, patiently, as one who knows that every whisper ripples. And in that knowing, you breathe differently. You make choices that hum. You listen with space. You rest without guilt. You allow life to meet you, not as a storm to survive, but as a conversation you're finally fluent in. And so, the voice within you is no longer a loop. It is a compass, a soft, steady invitation to remember what's possible, to speak with presence, and to let each thought be a thread in the reality you're weaving next. Subscribe to our channel so we can meet again next time. And until then, remember, story is still listening, and your voice is what gives it shape.